ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Post-Western Now Moving Beyond Western-Centrism Summit, hosted by the Institute for Advanced Studies in the Humanities and Social Sciences at National Taiwan University. This is the 14th event of our Vanguard Summit series. My name is Stephanie Zhang, and it is my great pleasure to serve as your host today. On behalf of the organizing team, I'd like to extend our warmest welcome to each of you. We are deeply grateful for your participation, and we look forward to a day of stimulating conversations, critical reflections, and meaningful exchange. To formally open this summit, it is my honor to invite our coordinator, the Dean of IHS NTU, Professor Sebastian Xianhao Liao, to deliver the opening address. Please join me in welcoming Professor Liao to the stage.
Well, good morning, friends and colleagues. First of all, of course, I'd like to welcome all of you for joining us this very morning. I'd just like to welcome you by giving you a very short introductory remark on why we are organizing this symposium on the post-Western now, thinking beyond or moving beyond Western-centrism. The word post-Western is increasingly being utilized in the last decade or so. It was not just this or that event that caused this concept to appear, but the result of converging trends surrounding the worsening crises of Western modernity. The recent disasters of COVID-19, the Ukrainian war, the Gaza humanitarian crisis, and the Trump phenomenon, all especially exposed the darkness at the heart of Western modernity, which had been long believed to be human destiny. All this probably should be traced back to Kant. I'm quoting him right now, from What is Enlightenment? At the very beginning of what is enlightenment, he says, enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity. Immaturity is the inability to use one's understanding without guidance from another. This immaturity is self-imposed when its cause lies not in lack of understanding, but in lack of resolve and courage to use it without guidance from another. Sapere aude. Have courage to use your own understanding. That is the motto of enlightenment. So what he's talking about here is that man is or has been imprisoned in immaturity, and only those who can emerge from this immaturity can attain to enlightenment. Yeah? And so he's distinguished between people who are immature still and those who have emerged from immaturity. Yeah? And there's a very natural hierarchy appearing from his discourse here. And I think that sets the tone for Western modernity. People have to be liberated from nature and become a rational animal. So, what follows is this. I'm quoting Kant again. Humanity has its highest degree of perfection in the white race. The yellow Indians have a somewhat lesser talent. The Negroes are much lower. And the lowest of all is part of the American races, meaning, the American Indians. So as a result, there's a hierarchy of nations, which is the highest crystallization of civilization. And I'm quoting Walter Mignolo. A nation has roots, and a state has laws, and people have rights, but of course, the character of each nation varies, and a successful cosmopolitanism and a perpetual peace would very much depend on the characters of nations and on the state they constitute together. Thus, England and France, and parentheses, and Germany, by implication of the enunciating agency, which is Kant himself, parentheses, are the two most civilized nations on earth. End of quote. This argument on which cosmopolitanism has long been based has almost doomed cosmopolitanism and set the stage for world wars in the past and maybe soon in the future. Critiques of Western centrism is imperative. It has to begin with, but not limited to, critiques of Western modernity. These kinds of critiques have abounded since Heidegger, but most of them have been limited to intra-Western self-critiquing that usually did not enlist resources from other traditions. Without more radical impacts from outside of the comfort zone of Western centrism, such kind of critiques would not be able to become aware of its limitations, given that the condition for what Yuk HUI, who will be speaking this afternoon, for what he terms the individuation of thinking, has not been established. And in view of this increasingly fragmented and conflict-prone world that was most recently further rattled and imperialized by Mr. Trump, there is indeed an unprecedented, according to Trump, it will be unprecedented. Right, remember that episode when he wrote unprecedented. Anyway, there's indeed an unprecedented need to reformulate a cosmopolitanism that could accommodate biodiversity, neurodiversity, and technodiversity. And undoubtedly, this project would have to begin with radically thinking beyond Western centrism. This symposium is meant to provide an occasion for thinking about possibilities of a critical cosmopolitanism by attempting to tap resources from what Walter Mignolo calls the exteriority of modernity. All right, so what we're going to do is we'll have our speakers first say a little more, if they would like to elaborate on some of the points that they think they need to. So maybe we should start with Rada. Anything else you would like to add?
This was a very exciting day. The embarrassing thing is that I find myself agreeing with much of what was said here, and most of it maybe by my colleagues sitting by this table. So one feels at home. But as I was listening to Yuk and Masaki in this last session, I was wondering about one of two things that I'd like to have explained or clarified, maybe by them if they have ideas about it. I'm sure they have. And also I'd like Sebastian to follow these questions because they are also addressed to him. But my first reference are those last two lectures. I was interested by what Masaki said, that identification can be defined by technology. It never occurred to me, but maybe you are right. My problem is another one. It is that identity can be defined from any side. It can have many focuses depending on where it comes from, the identification. And in my experience, there is always a gap between the identity that is assigned to you and how you feel. And also there is a gap, there are different gaps at the same time between local reality known by the locals and then other realities. Even realities are multiple. For all of us in some ways. And from this, I would think about asking a sort of question to all of you three, if I may, about identity and individuality. There is a gap here between identity and individuality. So how do we deal with it? And then how is the origin of the individual who is becoming? An individual is in becoming. This is one of Deleuze's terms, not only his, but with Deleuze and Guattari, you have becoming, which is being on the move. Becoming is not already there, but being is a static thing. There is a gap between being and becoming. So identity and individuality, maybe they coincide, maybe they don't. I have this a question I ask myself about Heimatlosigkeit, mentioned by Yuk. Yes, I agree that it's an important concept, and it's also multiple in its meaning, in its possible meanings, and the meanings we attribute to it. But at one moment you said, Yuk, a Heimat is, among other things, it's a fatherland. My question is, why is it not a motherland also? Or could it be a motherland? It may be normal. It's normal in a patriarchal context, and we live in patriarchal contexts, to say that Heimat is fatherland. And this can be said by men and women equally in the context of patriarchy. Heimat is also feminine in German. So when you say Heimat, Heimatlosigkeit, how come that you think of it in the first place as fatherland, as a masculine thing? It may look unimportant as a question. It may be almost like a joke, but at the same time it repeats in itself in culture all the time, and it is part of all those dichotomies that we have identified and talked about, binaries and so on, but it still bugs me. So if you three gentlemen have any ideas about this, I would be very grateful, and especially about the thing about technology defining an identity. Isn't identity always an allegation, an attribution, something that is alleged or is attributed to you? What can you do with an allegation like that? Thank you. I have only questions. I don't have answers.
All right. I was gonna ask you all to elaborate on the things that you said before, if you thought you need to, but obviously you don't need to. And how about you guys? Would you like to say more about what you talked about today, or just go ahead and respond to Rada's questions? Either way is fine.
I will speak later.
You'll speak later? Okay, how about Yuk, would you like to add something?
There are many things to be said, I think, but first of all, let's take one, why is not motherland, why is it fatherland? It doesn't matter to me if you prefer calling it motherland. I was just making a play, because we always said fatherland, mother tongue. Now I can say father tongue. What do you think? My father also taught to me when I was born. Should I insist that it has to be called father tongue, or I say mother tongue? Anyway, regardless of this, what I'm saying is as a play that in the book I try to approach this fatherland and mother tongue, or maybe motherland and father tongue, through a special organ. That's the tongue. Now, this is my partly response to the question about technology and identification. Even there's more to be said, because in my book I engage with one particular history, and that's Keiji Nishitani, the Kyoto School philosopher who went to study with Heidegger in the 1930s. He spent a year and a half eating German bread. And one day, Nishida's niece came to study with Heidegger, and she brought some Japanese rice and miso, and she made a meal with shirogohan, with miso soup, and so on. And Nishitani, after 1 year and a half of eating German food, when he ate the shirogohan, the white rice, he felt absolute delicious. Absolute delicious. Now, what happened? What is happening there? 30 years later, he wrote that the moment when he ate this rice, he thought of his ancestor growing food in this land called Japan. And after he went back to Japan, he participated in the Overcoming Modernity conference. He participated in this 3 symposium to justify the Second World War. So there's the kind of the town has this relation to the fatherland. But the town is also something that is where the motherland, the mother tongue takes place. So suddenly, we are kind of really moving towards something very, towards kind of kinship, towards kind of blood. But at the same time, I think that the tongue is also something we use to learn foreign language. Because I think both of us are immigrants in a way or another, that is also a kind of organ that allow us to acquire a new language, but also to change our taste, even to improve our taste, and so on. But so that was a kind of a play that I tried to do with the fatherland and the mother tongue. I will change it back, as you said, motherland, father tongue, and so far.
My terminology is somehow mixed up. Maybe I need to make it precisely like Yuk. So I said, the technology is can be looked as an identity, but maybe more precisely I should say technique. So because like rice making, cooking is an identity. So someone can make a very tasty rice, but the other person can make a very tasty bread. I think this is the background is a culture. But even inside Japan, every home has a different pickles, different miso soup. It's an identity. Then why this confusion was made inside myself? Because engineers, Japanese engineers, making many radios, televisions, and many consumer products, but I think they are making these products using their technique. Fundamental technology was invented by America. So we did not invent television, and also we did not invent radio. There are some, like a calculator. The first model of calculator was invented by a Japanese person, but then he went to the US to sell this idea to make a calculator. But anyhow, I think this is a kind of attitude with technology. So Japanese technicians, engineers use their technique to make it better. Then this, make it better makes the difference about identity.
Yeah. I just like to, realign our discussion with the theme of our symposium. I mean, I can respond to your questions by realigning, bringing it back to this theme. Yeah, I think definitely technology defines not only individual identity, but also the identity of the human beings. Because we were monkeys. Originally, we were monkeys trembling up in the treetops, and didn't know what to do. And then one day we just invented fire, right? Maybe fire. Yeah. And then we conquered the world. So that really defined the human being, but also I think it produced as a by effect the the anthropocentrism, thinking that we're destined to be the master of the planet. Yeah. So technology is always a double-edged sword, which I think very often we don't know how to use it. Yeah, we know how to progress in one direction, and then gradually we just kind of deviate from the right course. Which, I mean, probably we need to spend a lot of time trying to figure out which is the correct route for us to, travel further on. And so, I agree with you. But then, that defines the identity of human beings among all the beings. But on the other hand, I think in this I agree with Heidegger. The development of modern technology is something epochal. It was a world-changing event. But there was no fixed point. Maybe the steam engine. Maybe the weaving machine. Yeah. But anyway, so built in modern technology, there's this Western-centrism there, which we're not quite aware of, and that's why there's this necessity of decentering, about the techno-diversity, of decentering technology. Because for a long time, technology has become Western technology, but before modern technology, it was not. Back in the 15th century, Chinese technology was far ahead of the West. But then, there's no one race or one culture which is destined to be superior to the other races. But I think modern technology has been considered, Western technology, and so, but we were not. I think we've become oblivious of this fact, and so we consider it just human technology. But there's a Western centrism built in it, and so that's why I agree with Yuk that we need to decentralize technology. Sure. And right now, the problem right now, what we're witnessing right now is this concentration of contemporary technology. Maybe not anymore, but for a long time in Silicon Valley. So all the platforms that we've been using is American. Are American. All the platforms are American. Yeah. So, and this, of course, has exerted very, very strong unifying power on regulating the thinking of the human beings. So I'm walking into troubled water right now, but I'd just like to relate a story from a relative of mine who lives in Belgium. And her husband is saying that the Europeans under 40, above 40, tend to be suspicious of the Russian-Ukrainian war, because they tend to think that it's basically an American proxy war. Yeah. But Europeans under 40 are overwhelmingly supportive of this war supported Ukraine in this war. So obviously, the people under 40, are the generations that grew up with the platforms, and so they've read one piece of information. They've read 100 pieces of essays, and they actually have read only one. The same kind of stuff constantly pushed to you, right? Because of these platform algorithmic calculations. But anyway, I think this is how I would like to bring you back to the theme of the symposium. Yeah.
Could I ask you a sub-question, Sebastian? Yeah. What you mentioned now about Ukrainians, in between brackets, I don't believe it is linked so much to age. It is also linked to political orientation. But my question is this: doesn't reading about things on internet or on anything pass through language? And then isn't language a technology too? Maybe the first technology we had, besides climbing down from the tree. By the way, we have a saying in my first language. It is language that destroyed the monkey, which means the monkey became human and disappeared.
Yeah, the human beings are the animals sick with neurosis, right?
But there is a thing called, we can call the order of language. And there is this French author, very good, Cécile Camus. Cécile Camus wrote a book 3 years ago, maybe, published a book called Provincialiser le langage, or Provincialiser la langue, I'm not sure anymore. Provincializing language. She works on actually French language as exported to French colonies and on African languages. Well, with the language we get an order, and we are already being technologicized or something like that. Maybe, I don't know.
Sure.
Let's see what you think.
Maybe I say a few things just to clarify, but also to kind of because I have a problem with the concept of identity, because I think we are rather it's because it's like what Derrida said, we are always in an indefinitely phantasmatic process of identification. Like the identity is not given, but there's always a constant process of identification. Such as no such thing called a human. We are always in the process of hominization. And the hominization starts with two organs, like what I said earlier. Firstly, hands. Second, where at the same time, of course, is the tongue and the face. That's the language. When you read this, of course, these are kind of already well documented in texts of anthropology, and I think that Engels, as we wrote about, have very nice discussion about that in the Dialectics of Nature, of course. But I want to make it a little bit more precise concerning technology and East and West, because I think it's a very complex, and we easily fall back to kind of misunderstanding. Well, let me say in this way that in 2018, there was a very strange article published by Henry Kissinger called How the Enlightenment Ends. It was published in June 2018 in the Atlantics, in the magazine. So basically his argument is the following. His argument is that the Enlightenment has come to the end because the Enlightenment depends on its technology to universalize its philosophy. So that means like those black ships come to Japan, or cannons and so on, the weapons. They came with either with the missionaries or later with the army and so on. And he says in that, however, now this process seems to come to the end with artificial intelligence. And then his question is that we will need a new philosophy. So the philosophy accompanied the Enlightenment, and this process of universalization has come to the end, and we need to find a new philosophy to address artificial intelligence and so on. So at the time I asked myself, what does it really mean by that? That, like what Sebastian said, that let's to say before the 16th century, that we can find in the writing of Joseph Needham that there were many discoveries and inventions that we found in China were more advanced than many parts in Europe and so on. So there were already a kind of technodiversity. But the process of enlightenment, of modernization and so on seems to kind of block us from realizing that actually it's something, there has been a technodiversity, and that technology should be considered as, or maybe the European technology is the most advanced one. So the rest of them should be put in the same timeline, and with the European American one being the most advanced one. So there is a hierarchy of all kind of chronology of technological development. And that, for me, I think it ignored precisely the question of technodiversity. Now today, if we want to think about the post-West, I didn't say that I never made such a claim, even though people misunderstood, that we have to return to the kind of traditional craft or so on to use them to resist the AI and so on, because it doesn't make sense. But rather, how are we going to rediscover this technodiversity? Now the question comes is that how could we talk about technodiversity in the time when everyone believes that technology is universal, that there's no other option? Now I want to take this chance to address the question posed earlier, but she's gone, so maybe I shouldn't answer the question. But the point I want to make is that technology is not something abstract. Technology, when we talk about object, it has multiple layers. Such as a computer, it has hardware, it has software, it has, and even the software has different level abstractions. But the technology itself, we use actually embodies multiple assumptions that were already made in the design of the technology, right? These assumptions are cosmological, ontological, epistemological. And if we say technodiversity doesn't mean that let's give up AI, let's go back to the ancient Chinese or Japanese tool making. But we have to consider what kind of new assumptions we are able to bring into the into technological development, design, and deployment, and so on. However, this is under-researched, and I think that we really have to take this very seriously if we want to address the question of the post-West, to understand how could we still relate ourselves to this traditional thought or knowledge, and how could they be developed in this new context?
I'd just like to elaborate on what I said this morning. I think maybe some friends would think that what I was suggesting is to replace or overcome West, overcome modernity. That was not what I meant. Yeah. Nor was it what Camus meant. Camus actually just meant that we need to find a more balanced attitude toward the North and and the South. I mean, these two different kinds of modalities. And I was talking about this, Southern thought or re-enchanting the world in the same line. For instance, in the case of China or Chinese culture, what I was talking about is basically, we need to look what's happening in history at what's happening in history in terms of the dynamic between the South and North and South. Yeah. And so, in putting emphasis on the exteriority of modernity or these pre-modern cultures, I'm not saying that we need to go back to the pre-modern cultures per se and live in the same way as the ancient people did or the tribal people do. And we need to reinvent, the kind of animistic thinking or panpsychistic thinking in those cultures for our contemporary living. Yeah.
From the artist point of view, this is my impression after I've been hearing this discussion. Maybe the useless object. Think about what is the useless object is one of the way to develop or open the door, because every object surrounding ourselves is useful.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Oh. None of the object here is useless.
Yeah.
So,
but you can look at it from a useless perspective. Right?
Yeah. So
turn it into something useless.
Yeah, so then we can transform the worldview into uselessness, and then maybe this can be reached into the nothingness. I don't know, but kind of was I coined.
That's what actually Zhuangzi, the book Zhuangzi.
What is Zhuangzi?
Zhuangzi is one of the two Taoist classics. You have Lao Tzu, Lo Xi, and So Xi. Yeah. And he in one of the chapters he suggested is the uselessness is the biggest use.
And actually, the concept, one of the concepts of art is similar to useless. But then the audience, viewer, can define the value. So that's a play with the art piece. So sometimes artists don't know how to use it. Yeah, that's fun to make something.
During this whole day of discussions, I found there's something that's kind of missing, which is the class issue. I think at the present time, this development of technology, especially combined with the latest phase of neoliberalism, such as what's happening in the Silicon Valley, with all these oligarchs, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Andreessen. These people, I think they have come to believe that they will be. They advocated the dark enlightenment, right? They think democracy should be dispensed with, and the world should be ruled by this network state, which will be controlled by them. Yeah. So obviously, the gap of power or of wealth between different classes, especially the ruling class and the rest, has widened tremendously. So how are we going to be able to, maintain or even to recreate the techno-diversity? In view of the fact that technology has been almost monopolized by, maybe not anymore, but it seems like there's still Silicon Valley still has a strong control of many of the most advanced technology. So how are we going to diversify?
I think that is also a very important role for media artists, because we can make a prototype which is useless, but there is something, exist. Make something is very important.
Yeah.
Then we can play, we can start to think about the meaning. So today I did not tell you, but my very important manifest is liberate technology from capitalism.
Right.
So all the technology you have is already totally controlled by capitalism. But technology itself, another dimension.
Mm-hmm.
So artists can develop it. That's fun for the artist,
Nice.
but also important maybe for the thinkers.
Right.
Yeah.
But you need audience. How are you going to reach the audience? And also, if you upload your work on the platform that you're using.
Yeah, sometimes prototype can present in some way by words, by movie, by some other, way to, because it is a multimedia moment. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, make it and show it is possible. And as you said, like Taro Okamoto, maybe you cannot imagine, but he is very famous, not as an artist. It looks like a comedian. Every week he was on the TV and doing like this, art is explosion. He's saying, but no one knows the real meaning. So that was a kind of trickster.
So he's infiltrated popular culture.
Yeah, maybe that was a kind of a way he found to educate.
Okay, great.
So I will also take the chance to clarify something, because so what Sebastian was talking about regarding the question of class is that it has to do with, maybe we call it human enhancement. And that's to say the transhumanist ideology, which is now the center is in California, in Silicon Valley. And of course, very interestingly, is that transhumanism also claims itself to be posthumanism. So they can. And they, of course, they also quoted Nietzsche and so on, to support that they are doing something good. But of course, with the transhumanism and what they call human enhancement, because the human enhancement consists of three elements: lifespan, so you can live longer; better intelligence, so higher IQ, and better emotion control. So they promote that these are the things we can enhance, but also it involves some kind of genetic engineering and so on. But in the way that they are trying to produce a kind of a class or class difference. That means the class that is enhanced and the class that is not enhanced. And if you want to be enhanced, of course, you have to pay. You can edit your DNA of your children. You can put something like the Neuralink in your brain and so on. So it's kind of posthumanism, that they abandon the concept of the human. They see the human as a limit. So how are we going to confront this? That is at the center of Silicon Valley. One key point is that it is an intensification of consumerism, right? And consumerism in the sense that if I pay, I can be enhanced. Right? If you want to be clever, you can be enhanced, and so on. So, how are we going to think about the relation between technology and economy? That's the key point. The relation between technology and economy. If we follow the current modes of consumerist economy, I don't think we can go much further. We probably will be trapped there. And the problem with when you say that Western technology. For me, Western technology or not is not probably the key problem. The key problem is that these technologies are designed to do bad things. And that's if they do good things, I don't mind, but they do bad things in the sense that, in the way that when you look at Facebook, they were designed to make you edit it. And that was already at the very beginning of the design. The design principle is to make you edit it. TikTok, Twitter, all of these are designed with a very explicit purpose to make you edit it, to make you consume more, make you buy more things, to waste more of your time, and so on. So we need a different economic model. In order to develop it, we need to rethink about technology. We have to ask ourselves what kind of technology are preferable. And these are very concrete questions. Let me give you an example because it sounds too abstract, but let me give you an example. We can also say, if we don't want to have Facebook, what kind of social network can we design? And if you look at social network, if you look at Facebook or Twitter, they assume that an individual is a social atom. It assumes that the society is a collection of social atoms. It assumes that all social relations could be reduced to a line between two dots. These are the assumptions that are already central to the design. But we can ask ourselves, well, maybe we can change all these assumptions. What if an individual is not a social atom? How are we going to program them? How about developing a social network that is not based on individuals? Could it be developed based on group, based on collective, and so on? So these are fundamental questions related to economy, related to consumerism, and so on. So I think we need to think of the relation between technology, economy, and new models of individuation against kind of consumerism. So that might be one way to think about that. If I take your question seriously.
Sure. And I think probably the current kind of social media also has a very specific neoliberal bent to it, which is like exactly what you just said. They assume that the society is composed of atoms, so everyone is on its own, and extreme individualism is encouraged, and that's very very neoliberal. So that's obviously something that we need to overcome, right? We need to at least cope with, which is what we are doing post-Western. That's something that we have to post. Yeah.
Maybe very short, briefly, the question is, what do we have to rethink? And from what all of you said here, and I said also, I think unfortunately that we have a lot of work because we need to rethink everything. You see, so many things. So, and make things thinkable that were not thinkable before, right? As to what is useless, it depends on what purpose for. Either everything is useless or everything is useful. That is also something we can debate about.
Right. Depends on how you look at it.
Thank you.
Actually, for us, because I think it's not about use and useless, because there are different kinds of use. Oh. And the one we criticize is a means to end, the utilitarian use. That we find like something is useful because we can use it as a means to an end, and this end could be clearly stated. But there are different kinds of use. For example, the use of the useless is also use. But this use of the useless is not a use that is utilitarian use. Or for example, of course you can, back to the question about music and arts, of course you can go there go to a concert hall and you are burned out and you want to relax, you want to use it. But it's much more than that. You go to a concert hall to listen to music, not simply just to take it as a utilitarian use, like when you make it artwork and so on. So I do think that the question of use is central. If we want to develop a critique of what you call the critique of capitalism, critique of the current modes of economy. So we have to put it at center, but that would be too big to be explored here.
Thanks for the lectures today. I'm a data scientist. When we talk about technology, how can we define the technology is Western or Eastern or Asian or American nowadays? Because, for example, we can define the investment, how the investment goes to that company to launch the apps or program. But it's hard to define the core, the value of the program or apps or AI or where it comes from. So that's my question. Thanks.
It's not so much a question, but rather a comment. I saw the title of today's symposium, The Post-Western Now. That seems to implicate or suggest that we know where we're going. But I haven't really heard a very clear answer to that or any hint clearly to that question. That's something that worries me. If you look at the world event, not many of the speakers have talked about that, but I'm sure it's also on your mind as well. So for instance, if you look at China's rise, just literally the past year or month, right? You see the deep seek that suggests that even without the deep involvement of the Western technology, Chinese can surpass, to all the surprise. I guess the Silicon Valley giant probably had to admit it too. With a very minimal cost and have open sources, they can beat all these very expensive models that the US built. On the other hand, if you sort of look at just the last couple of days, the conflict between India and Pakistan, what's the significant thing about that? Why is China so crazy about this event? Well, that's because Pakistan using the jet, the airplane, produced, manufactured by China, exported to Pakistan. And they beat up all these Western planes are in India. So that suggests, at least as far as the hard power is concerned, China has reached the point that they can squarely challenge all these superiority of Western technology. So after that, the Western history has been, after you have establishment of a solid hard power, then you can make your soft power be influential. So would that be the path for the Chinese in the long run? That's something can be a little bit scary. That's my question. And comment.
I'll respond first, and then we will have the last word. I think I think he's already made it very clear, and I maybe here and there. Technology is not abstract or neutral. It has all these built-in assumptions. For instance, Facebook. It's based on this neoliberal idea of unbridled individualism. So everyone is on its own, and you are entitled to satisfy yourself to the utmost. That's the neoliberal assumption, which kind of was encouraged ever since the 80s, starting from New York. So the whole postmodern culture was a neoliberal kind of a neoliberal kind of manufactured phenomenon. And on the other hand, you can also look at DeepSeek, for instance. Before DeepSeek, even though Meta kind of was open source, right? It allowed people to use its source code, but it wasn't very. It's still kind of limited to big money, right? Only big money can actually develop that kind of AI applications. But then DeepSeek actually undermined the whole Western monopoly on this whole thing. So I think that from that point, from that particular perspective, it's an encouraging development. It disrupts the very Western monopoly on this whole thing, right? So it becomes cheaper, it becomes democratized. So now Europe, India, everybody can develop its own sovereign AI on the basis of this. So, there are ways to do things. Sometimes it just happened. I'm not sure whether the Chinese actually indeed wanted to democratize it, but obviously it has this effect there, right? And last but not least, you were saying that we didn't really suggest any path forward. I was a bit surprised because in my talk, all I talked about was how we should proceed from here, to the post-Western. Because basically, we need to re-enchant by means of going beyond the monotheistic or binarist, conception of the world. Monotheism, divides the world into God's realm and Satan's realm. And so that's why we had so many religious wars. I mean, there were wars in the East, in any places in the world. But, I think most of the wars were not fought for religious reasons. But in the West, I believe it was not really, at bottom, it was not really because of, ideological reasons or religious reasons. It was economic reasons. But it was always, couched in this rhetoric. And people believed it. I think many of the soldiers who went to the battlefield in the First World War, they truly believed that they're fighting a holy war against the Satans. So, Yuk, would you like to?
The first one was a really big question because, and I think it's a very, very reasonable question. How to define something being Western technology and so on. Because if you go back to history, that in ancient Greeks, technology was very much influenced by Persia, by the Near East. So actually what was called West was actually from the East. By saying that, what I want to say is that it doesn't really mean that it depends on where the technology is made. Because when Sebastian talked about post-West, and I said that post-West means we are already Western. We are using these technologies that are Western. Because I wanted to return to the question of modernity, because we didn't really make any qualification of what it means by modernity. Personally, I would define modernity as epistemological and methodological rupture that took place in the 16th, 17th century in Europe that produced a different kind of knowledge. I think Rada talked about that, how this knowledge, the limit of this knowledge this morning as well. So on the one hand, there is this kind of continuation of this knowledge that is considered to be universal. And secondly, is that the technology that the question is not to negate the West, but rather what I'm trying to call for is the question of techno-diversity, meaning to resist this homogeneous form of knowledge or homogeneous model of individuation that we find, for example, in Facebook and other kinds of social media and so on. So that's why I didn't want to oppose East and West. Rather, I call for the question of diversity. Now, the second question I think is related, but I'm a little bit troubled by this question because, as far as I understood, we are not speaking here as a nationalist. We are not speaking here about China is going to beat Europe, China is going to beat the USA. This is this is this repetition of the rhetoric of the decline of the West and rise of the East. This is something we have to be very careful. And I assume that no one here is really into this kind of rhetorics. However, I think it is also maybe I have one disagreement with Sebastian on the point of DeepSeek. Is for me that the rise of DeepSeek is really alarming. It's alarming in the sense that actually what we are going to see is that geopolitics will be based on the competition of the same kind of technology, what now we call the AI. And what is going to happen? In 2017, when Putin said on the 1st of September to all the Russian children, he said, whoever leads in AI will dominate the world. That was 2017. I mean, Russia has no capacity. But I do think I think that now, with the discourse of sovereign AI, basically we are running into this kind of discourse and competition. And where is it leading to us? I would say catastrophe. And that's probably not a desirable future if we want to think about post-West.
Right. All these scientists, over a few thousand, right? They signed a petition saying that we should we should be aware of the dangers of the development of AI. But they just, Elon Musk, for instance, but he just continued to do that. We have run out of time, and I think we had a full day of very fruitful and exciting changes. And thank you all very much for joining us, and thank you all the speakers here for giving us all these exciting, thought-provoking ideas. So, before I step down, actually there are a few more events, so please join us again. Thank you very much.